Welcome to the Music Gardener's Almanac, where we explore the roots and fruits of everybody music. Through conversations with movers and shakers around the world, we discover how these roots and fruits intertwine with all aspects of our lives and the common ground we all share.
Don't forget to water them, though.
Everybody music, it's us. In this episode, I talked to Marieke Slovin, who spent a number of years in Brussels turning stories of immigrants into songs. As I was listening to this conversation, it made me think of a snowfall that seeps into the ground over time, just continuing to nourish the music garden. So let it sink in. Let this conversation sink in.
I am a word of hope and love. I bring honor to the world. I will push the darkness away. Can I come to your house and stay? I am a word.
So I just want to introduce you. So again, we could go over Marieke, because like there are.
Like a pirate.
Like a pirate. Okay, Marieke.
Yes, you got it.
Okay, cool. So, and tell me a little bit about what it is that you've been doing.
Sure.
Why are we talking about this?
Well, I guess for me, it did start, when we were setting up with the sound, talking about childhood, it did start with my experience growing up in the classical music tradition. I grew up performing and studying classical piano very seriously. And I eventually, in my early 20s, I stopped playing. I was really disenchanted with that world because it's not a place where people are invited to be authentic and to be who they are, to express themselves from that kind of inner place of knowing. It's a place where you're expected to perform a piece that was written however long time ago, as it was written, and just that way. And so for me, I got to the point where I was just thinking, this isn't who I am, so I guess I can't be a musician. And it wasn't until, a few different things, but one was that I started studying in the Prescott College PhD sustainability program. And during that time, lots of different things happened in my personal life, my professional life, but in this program especially, I was really noticing that the idea of how to create a sustainable world was that each individual person in the program, including the faculty, would burn themselves right out to save the world without kind of reflecting on their own lives, whether they were actually modeling that path in the way that they were showing up for themselves. And so my focus became this idea of self-sustainability. And so starting with the individual. And part of the way that took shape was that I connected with another musician in my cohort on this idea that inviting people to share a story from their life and working with them to shape their words into a song could actually help to create sustainability at the individual level. There could be a catharsis that happens, and often was, a kind of therapeutic kind of healing that could happen. And it also was kind of like this idea of sort of witnessing the human experience and celebrating it through creative expression. And so that idea of self-sustainability and the songwriting method, which came to be called in our research together Story to Song, was really what brought me to where I am now, which has been spending the almost decade since working with people to write songs from their stories.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is like the first interview, I feel like we're already like, I don't have to like find ways to connect what you're doing with what I'm doing. Okay, so the podcast, I don't even know if you know the name of the podcast. It's called The Music Gardener's Almanac,
Oh, I love that.
Cultivating the Roots and Fruits of Everybody Music.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so the idea of like this, I've had this organization. I'm just giving you a little background so
Sure.
that you know how
Yeah.
to fit in your story with what I'm talking about. So I started this organization in 2013, Commusiki, which is music is the key to community. But it's always hard to pronounce, and people forget it, and like it's hard to, you don't know how to spell it. There's all different things. And so like just recently we rebranded ourselves as Everybody Music.
Nice.
And the website is everybodymusic.rocks. So, because everybody music does rock. And the idea is that it's kind of like taking it back from this, like as we were talking about capitalism before.
Yeah.
I mean, like taking it out of that world where we're just like sharing our music, and the idea is that we're all born completely musical, and that musical training is really training. I tell to people, training is for dogs. Really. It's not for music, because we're already just musical.
We're primally,
right,
biologically.
Our bodies are designed,
Yeah.
literally for music.
Yeah.
So, and so it's hard to break through that spell.
Well, certainly. I mean, I think that I personally can recall that as a child, I sang all the time, and there's a moment when I stopped. And it's because someone externally reflected to me that I didn't have the kind of voice that was what they wanted to hear. And a lot of the women I've worked with have said, oh, I can't sing, I don't have a good voice. Men too, or I don't have a story that could be a song, right? So the idea is just like you're saying. I mean, it's trying to kind of get through those external layers that have taught us that we're not good enough, we're not interesting enough, we're not valuable, and to kind of give birth to a new way of thinking that gives birth to music.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And this whole story, and also when I learned about your creating songs from stories, and that was something that I wanted to do down, at the border.
Yeah.
And it was, it was already hard enough just to try to speak Spanish. So, and then try to translate, and we translated our song into Spanish and 6 other languages, but it's really it's that and I do songwriting with my students. As when I teach music, most of the time I bring in songwriting as part of it.
Yeah.
And so that's what I want to hear more about.
Yeah.
About that. And so did you start, I mean, you've been doing this where you're writing songs from people's stories, and you're helping people write songs.
Yes. So I work, when we kind of developed this method, the idea was that there was a person who was working as a kind of guide, like a songwriting guide, working with a person who's a participant or storyteller sharing their story, but that the process was collaborative. But my role is really to kind of help kind of draw the song out in terms of noticing as the person's sharing either words or melodies, this could work, and kind of building from that. But the idea is really that that the song itself is also a participant, I've found. The song wants to come out, and sometimes it comes out really quickly, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it comes out in English, sometimes it comes out in Dari or Arabic.
What's
Swahili.
Dari?
Dari, there are, I always get this a little bit confused, because depending on, so if you're from Dari, Afghanistan, I think Dadi is from Afghanistan. So, so you're talking about just the challenge of language. And I spent 4 years in Brussels doing this songwriting with refugees at an asylum center, so the kind of place where people register for asylum. And then when we first started the project, they were there often for many years, and then it kind of shifted into just a temporary, they're here for a day or two and then moved somewhere else. But the idea was that people would share in spoken word or in writing any language, and then we'd sing in that language. And I think we work on sort of a translation as well, but thinking about that, honoring the authentic experience, I think being invited to share a story in your native language is just another way of kind of helping another person who's, especially for a refugee who's been through horrible experience and now they're in this new place where they are kind of out of their element and not accepted in the way that they anticipated, to kind of honor their true voice, right, in their native language.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, do you speak different languages?
I speak French. I can understand quite a bit of Spanish. But I think that, there's also there's a community element and a solidarity that's created when you work with people trying to kind of find different meanings in different languages and nuances. And certainly we used Google app Translate as well. And we used we try to act out different, gesticulate and actually physically try to act out these ideas that are harder to translate, like the idea of being in between, right?
Right.
Trying to get someone who speaks Arabic to share what that is in Arabic when they don't speak English, there's challenges. But I think there's always ways to communicate. Music being the universal language, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So these in Brussels, you had quite a range of different languages coming in. It's pretty amazing. Here it's mostly Spanish and then some, Haitian people, and so and then there are people that come through, but it's that is a real gateway over there.
Yeah, diversity in Brussels. Brussels is the capital of Europe, and so there's embassies from all over the world and Europe. And
wait a second. You mean, are you speaking figuratively, or is it really
It's the capital of the EU. So
I
that's
didn't know.
where.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
Now I realize that. I did know
right?
that.
So diversity is the rule. It's not the exception. And different places in the United States, diversity is more accepted than others. But there's, and certainly in Brussels, not everyone is thrilled that there are refugees coming from other places. But Belgium tends to be a country where it is, I don't want to say easier, but maybe a little less challenging, where refugees are more welcomed, and the asylum process is maybe a bit more accessible. So there are a lot of people from all over seeking a better life. And and I can tell you a little bit about kind of the origins of the project, but it is truly, we published a book of the Finnish songs, and I think there are maybe 11 different languages, in there. So.
Wow. Okay. So that I see, I'm starting to get a better picture of how this comes together. So you're really, it's not like you have a translator, somebody that's
Well, yes and no, right? So there's different ways that you can get around not having the language that other people have, or having different languages. And so what I mentioned, so maybe I should explain. So when I first moved to Brussels in the fall of 2016, I wanted to be writing music with people from their stories using this story-to-song method. And I really wanted to be able to offer it to people who maybe didn't feel like they were being heard. people who are in the society, but also kind of on the outside. I think that being invited to share your story and go through that creative process is something that can benefit everyone. And because I've personally witnessed that and I've experienced it myself. But I also think that for people who feel like they are helpless, that they're not able to advocate for themselves, or they're in a place where they just don't have a lot of control. They're waiting to find out what's going to happen. I be allowed to stay in Belgium? Will I be sent back to this place where that's unsafe? I felt like using this songwriting could maybe make a big difference, and so I reached out to organizations working with refugees because I knew the refugee crisis, had been going on for several years. I think it really started to become like I'm using like air quotes, right, like an issue in 2015, and so I reached out to these different organizations, and there's one that invited me to come and just kind of like have a look around and see if I might like to volunteer. And the day that I went there, they said, "Oh, we have this woman from Scotland who's been offering poetry for many years, and perhaps you might connect with her. And if not, don't worry, you can do your own thing." But we clicked, and her name is Sarah Reeder Harris, and she's been in Belgium for decades. She married a Belgian man. She's a writer and poet, and it just was a really brilliant sort of wedding of two creative forms of expression in poetry, which for a lot of people coming from the Middle East, poetry is just such an important part of their culture, and then the music. And so also for looking at kind of people speaking these different languages, English is not their first language, sharing verbally can be a bit daunting, but writing a few phrases in their native language, maybe feels a little bit safer. So we could we just put a big piece of paper on the wall, and we'd get words and phrases from lots of different languages. We would then work with people at the center who, really remarkable individuals who would have already learned English from watching YouTube videos, or, so we worked as a group, and then we used, Sarah speaks French, Nederlands, so Dutch and English. I speak English and French, can understand some Spanish. And then we'd have people from Gaza who could also speak English and were studying, people coming to the center, they're offered to study for, a course in Dutch or French. So then they're studying, and you just end up with this kind of like very engaging debate on the nuances of language and meaning. And you wind up with a song in all these different languages that shares the story of a lot of different people, but you find a way to bring it together.
Yeah, that actually reminds me. I remember I was like workshopping this Build the Bridges song. Yeah. That we were doing it in Arabic and Hebrew, and we were in New York at the Stony Point Center, and we were talking about like the different nuances of take down the walls, and somebody was like, and these different languages, and I was trying to understand. Yeah. Like, I didn't know these languages, but I'd hear like people would say, "Well, that really means tear down the wall."
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
And I think that we really want to say to like disassemble the wall, like, and we don't want to be violent.
Right.
We don't want to like destroy, And then another person says, "Yes, we do. Like these walls are like have to be torn down." Yeah. And so, and then I was talking to this guy in Israel about it, and then he had a completely different take on it, and so like
and they're all legitimate,
right, and so like, but then we have to figure out which one rolls nicer, like which one feels better rhythmically, because we already had like the song, like was already done, and then the different languages we'd have to change some of the rhythms, and like you have to decide like what, and the meaning comes through the rhythm of it also. Right.
There's many different layers of kind of creating the song to communicate something, and you want the rhythm to also fit the story. and what's being communicated. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's say somebody is telling you their story, and assuming that you can kind of understand it linguistically, you can follow them, like they're not speaking in a language that you have are clueless about, right? So how do you do that? Can you break it down a little bit, how that actually works?
Well, and so there's different ways.
And also, because you were saying you have this, there's a word that you use for describing, what is this called? You call it, there's a system.
Story to song. The method itself.
Yeah, the method.
Yeah.
Is this something that you developed?
Yes. With Malcolm Brooks when we were here at Prescott College in the PhD Sustainability Education Program. He's a composer, and he had been, kind of toying with this idea of what he was calling autoethnographic songwriting, which is a very big academic term basically for a person sharing a personal kind of studying themselves under the lens of whatever subject it is they're studying. So studying their experience through the lens of sustainability, right? Or I wrote an ethnography on sustainability, on this idea of self-sustainability. So I studied my experience creating a more sustainable life, making it an auto-ethnography versus studying someone else's experiences, creating a sustainable life through that lens. So anyway, the idea started in his practice in Maine, where he works with students, and he was looking at this idea that perhaps if you invite a person to share a personal story, that this might help to overcome creative block because it gives you something to work with. And it was really in our work together where he was he was kind of like he's the composer, and I was sort of studying with him, kind of learning how to write music in this way. And it was through this iterative research dynamic that we came up with this idea of actually just calling it what it is, story to song. You're starting with a story and creating a song, and then looking at the different steps that you would take to write a song, starting with having a person share a story. And when we worked one-on-one with a person, we would actually be using a computer and typing all of their words. And when a person's speaking in English and you speak English, you can end up with pages and pages. And then what we would do is we would shape the story, just all this text, into what kind of looks like a poem or a song. Like you take a breath in, you look at a phrase, and then you hit enter when you exhale. So you just end up with a really long poem. And then you start looking at, and as we're hearing the story, we're already thinking about this. What are some different messages from the story that communicate something that's a universal element from the human experience? So whether you have a person in Afghanistan who's been a refugee, or a person in Arizona who has never had to leave their home at a moment's notice, they can both recognize and personally make a connection with this idea of wanting to belong in a new place, because maybe they've moved somewhere before or have been introduced to a new community, right? And then you want to kind of tease that out, and there's often many different possible messages because every story has so many layers of meaning. But, that's kind of the general idea that's shaped into the chorus, that element that's repeated. And then the verses are really the events of the story as they're unfolding. And, I worked, I don't know. So, it's kind of depending on what you've experienced, you're telling the story about maybe leaving Afghanistan, coming to Belgium, and so you have these just kind of action verb things that are happening. But then you want to be able to kind of lead into this happened, and this happened, and that's why I want to live somewhere safe, or I want a peaceful life. And that comes back to that chorus. So then people listening to the song can see this person as a human being and make a connection and say, like, oh, this is what a person who's experienced having to leave a war-torn country is going through. And that could be me. I recognize that now because I recognize the feeling of wanting to live a peaceful life.
Right,
or wanting
right.
a better life for my children, right? And so essentially we go through this process and we're looking for the chorus, that message. We're shaping the verses, trying to shape it into a short enough 3 to 5 minute song from all the words. And then as we're shaping it, we go through these moments where we invite the person who shared the story to try to sing. So we might have them try singing through the chorus or try singing through some of the verses or words that speak to them. And as they're singing, it's that's a pretty vulnerable experience, and people are worried about not sounding good. But what we're doing as the guides, we're just listening for possible beginnings of a melody. People will often sing the same thing over and over, and then for some reason, maybe there's a line that's particularly, connected with something really deeply emotional for them. They'll sing a totally different arc of notes, and from that, I try to start with that, figuring out what key they're singing in, the exact notes, and then building off of that. And that was kind of the process that we would go through, mostly working with one person, sometimes working with a group or with an audience having a volunteer come up. The experience that I had in Brussels was closer to the kind of workshops that I did with children. Adults have a tendency, just like I am right now, to share a really long story. They have the capacity, and as we're speaking in the same language, there's just an ability to do that. When I do workshops with children, I would just put down a piece of paper and let them write different words or communicate those to me, and I'd write them down, and it would be a shorter, more condensed, often wackier song.
Wow! So you actually, but you start with the lyrics.
Yeah, I start with a story. The words from this, right? Yes, yeah. So the melody comes later. Yeah,
right. That's interesting. Like, is there because when I write a song, often they happen at the same time. Like they're just so they're inseparable. Like they are like I'm trying to convey something that is beyond words.
Right.
Really?
Yeah.
So like I'm trying to express something, and I do this with students too, like when we write songs. Often it will be just one sentence or something, and then like find that melody, and like you say, and if they don't think of themselves as a singer and they don't think that they can write a melody, then I just like listen, is it going up, is it going down, and then and then sometimes we do these weird things where we come up with these weird chords because they're not really sure what key they're in.
Certainly.
And so I'm sort of going with that. So I'm just like kind of like actually comparing your approach to my approach.
And there's no right approach. I mean, I tend to work with people who don't think that they have artistic capacity or musical ability, let alone writing a piece of music. And I certainly, when I first started working on this method, with my research partner, when we were doctoral students, I didn't really think I could be a composer. And it was through that process that I realized, I'm actually like co-creating this method. I do have this capacity. But when you're working with someone who doesn't even necessarily play a musical instrument, I think kind of starting at the beginning with the story, is a sort of just freeing of whatever it is inside. It's just it's a way to kind of start that process. And then by the time you start getting to where a person might sing, or you might add kind of music, you've created a connection and you've created trust, hopefully, to kind of take it to that even more vulnerable place. Sharing the story can be very emotional and people aren't always ready for it.
I think it would really be interesting for us to try to work together, and just like seeing it, like how our different approaches. But you've done, really, you've put a lot of attention on this.
Thanks. Yeah, I really believe in it. I'm sure that's just as you do, right? And this has been a way for me to create space for people to just be who they are and to share their own story in their own words, and especially for people who are marginalized and are having their story told for them by other people, many of whom have not experienced what it is to be a refugee and then are being othered as a result. Here's a way to kind of shift the perspective and shift agency.
Right. So
Right.
you're going like your gift. It's a gift to them, and also a gift to the greater society. Like that's what I always felt like when I'd be at the border,
Yeah.
and people would say, "Oh, you're doing such." Great work, like,
Well, yeah.
like, so like
But
like
you are.
so
Yeah.
you're giving them this great gift, and I actually feel like my bigger job is to bring back the stories.
I feel that
and
too.
even though like
yeah.
I haven't been doing like what you've been doing, but I've been listening to people and like talking to them and finding out like whether some were like veterans and they've fought for this country and then they get back to this country and then they get sent to Mexico and they're like trying to make a life.
Yeah.
And I'm just like listening to them talk about this, and I would love to go deeper with that with the songwriting, and I was like trying to I don't know
Well, we could we can walk through. I mean, some of the songs, like I could share a song, play a song, talk about how we did it. I mean, but also I think, isn't it just such a gift that someone trusts you to share their story with you?
Oh,
right?
yeah,
There's
but I didn't like it. I just wanted to say that the real thing was that people in this country like really need to have a better connection with what's going on down there,
Yeah.
And so like
that
is like really what I was thinking about.
Well, sure. And so going back to that, music as the universal language and us being innately musical. I mean, even if you don't think you have musical capacity, when you listen to something, a foot starts tapping, and I think that a melody can open the heart. It's like a way in to really hear the story in this kind of embodied way, right? We were talking as we were setting up about kind of knowing something, like we should treat all people equally, but then embodying that and actually seeing all refugees as human beings.
Right. It's interesting because when like race is something that like I become more and more conscious of how unconsciously I play out my own version of racism. Like I just see, I make assumptions about people that I'm not even aware of, and the more I pay attention to it, it starts to shift. But I realize that it's so deep, and it's the same like with immigration and all that.
Well, and I think there's just, we just go back to this. We learn when we're little, like, to treat everyone well, and everybody deserves la la la, right? And human beings, we all were born, we deserve to have a good life and a safe life. But then somewhere along the way, fear kind of creeps in, and it can creep in quite intentionally from messages that we get, whether it's from religion or the media or wherever it comes from our community. And it's really easy. It's so much easier to just kind of keep that tape running than to shift and take that tape out and put one in that creates a paradigm shift to where all people are actually not that unlike us, because it means you have to really reflect back on how you show up in the world, how you treat people. And it just shakes everything up, because from like the bottom all the way to the top, you start seeing how people aren't being treated equal. Even as not all refugees are equal. And I think all refugees should be able. We're just nomads. People move. We've always just moved. You should be able to leave a place that doesn't feel safe and live somewhere safe without having to go through this just completely crushing, demoralizing experience. But even in Europe right now, with Russia attacking Ukraine, Ukrainians are being welcomed, and in a very different way than people from the Middle East, that compared to people trying to cross the border in Mexico into the United States, right? And thank goodness that they're being welcomed, but also, why not others? So anyway, we're digressing. But,
well, it's all interconnected. But I definitely I have a copy of this book, and.
Right. So,
and also, visually, you've got so much beautiful pictures and stuff in here. This is for this listening audience, I highly recommend this book.
Well, and so the book came actually because we were planning on participating in this literature event celebrating diversity and culture and the literature kind of realm of Brussels, and we thought, wouldn't it be interesting to create like just a little pamphlet with a few of the songs, to be able to share at a workshop where we would talk about poetry and songwriting. And then we got a little bit of funding, and then it just turned into this. Well, let's go through the songs and choose just a couple. And we have to take this one. You have to, as soon as you start seeing just the person behind the song. So it turned into this huge book that we then worked with, people that we had met at the center and from just the very diverse community of Brussels to make sure all the languages were in there. And so we have this, it turned into more of a tome than a pamphlet.
I have a question actually.
Yeah, please.
So, I noticed like the people that are anonymous.
Yes, that was intentional.
So,
yeah.
But was anybody, so it was like you made, this is just about the processing again. Mm-hmm. So like did you decide that like everybody would be anonymous? Or did some people say, I want to be anonymous? And did other people say, I actually want my name? Because like, did anyone say they,
Well, so we kind of made an executive decision based on the rules of the asylum center to keep people anonymous because, so we try to keep in touch with a lot of people we've worked with. And I wrote basically an essay, kind of written piece about the writing of each song. And I've tried to remember the name of each person we worked with. But when you're at the center, you're really, people are often there hiding. So women and children, flat out, you're not allowed to use their name or take their photos, or at least share their photos. You have to ask for permission to take photos, permission to use photos, and you're really not supposed to publish people's names or identities. So, and that's for safety. So what we thought, we're working on this book, and while we were working on the book, the pandemic started, and the borders in Europe were shut. The program was shut down, so it became quite a little bit more challenging to kind of get in touch with people, right? I mean, we have social media, we have email, and ways to keep in touch with people from the book. So we would kind of sometimes reach out to them, but we just made a decision that the photos we used would not show people's faces, and that we wouldn't use names. The only name that we used was for a person that we worked with who went back to his home country and passed away. Mm. So as a way to kind of honor him, we put his name in there. But he's the only person.
Right.
But it would be interesting, right, because I'm talking about really wanting to honor these people's voices. And I've thought about a kind of sequel that actually talks about, the importance of poetry, the creative arts, collaboration, participatory arts, and then actually publishes the stories behind these songs and could identify people who we can reach out to who give permission, to do that.
Right. It's always and also sometimes, like pictures for one thing. Like I always realize that like having a camera there at all just like blew the vibe and like it just made it difficult to focus on what we're really trying to do.
Yeah, and when I write music, I mean, I use the voice memo app on my phone because otherwise, the second someone sings something and I try to repeat it, it's like gone from my mind, right? So there's a lot of just communication around that. Is it okay to record it? Is it, and if I did video, it generally wouldn't have people in it unless they gave their permission. But I do feel like it was really important to document the process as much as possible because it's like what we were saying before. I mean, to me, it's really important to create this welcoming, safe space for a person to share what can be a difficult story, and to move through that process. But then it's also really important just in terms of creating social change and opportunities for empathy to share those songs. And so I took lots of photos, of the pages, the words people were writing. I mean, so these are the photos in that book. And as much as possible, the photo next to that's the song is the piece of paper that we wrote the song.
And I love and you have, you intersperse like English translations, and then you have. It looks like I'm looking at this. I am the change, and it looks like you have English and French.
We've got a whole bunch of
also
languages.
Arabic,
yeah.
and like
Yeah.
it looks like that. You have Arabic. Is that like Turkish or something?
There's Arabic. Well, so that song, right? So, and each song is unique, right? And I was talking a little bit about the method that Malcolm and I worked on kind of iteratively. And it's the way that I've used it with refugees, like I said, is more like I do with children, only because they don't have the language. So sharing a spoken story might not, be as easy or feel as safe as writing a few phrases. This song came from a man who we met from Gaza, who was at the center for years, and so we often worked with him. Like every week he'd come, and he was a poet, and so. I mean, the original text is his Arabic, which we then translated into English. And sometimes what we would do is then just try translating it into a bunch of different languages so lots of people can sing together. I mean,
different languages at the same time?
No, we'd go, just the same message, but in different languages. So we start by singing the Arabic, then English. Then we'd sing it in French, then in Netherlands, then in, Dari or whatever, Spanish. Person wanted to come.
Netherlands, is that like Dutch?
Dutch, yeah. And so I mentioned like Sarah's a poet, and sometimes just to inspire people to share, as a blank page can feel like an opportunity, but it could also feel daunting. She would share a phrase from a poem, and so sometimes we would just translate that phrase into lots of different languages, and then at some point someone might say, "Well, this makes me think of," and write it down. So lots of different ways of writing the song.
And so like online you have the songs in these different languages.
Yeah, in the introduction, there's two sections in the introduction. One is an explanation of the project, one's an explanation of the authors, who are me, Sarah, and then the residents of this center. But there's a link to a section of my website where you can basically click on every single song, and you can read about the experience of writing it, how it kind of took shape. There's photos. You can listen to actual recordings that I took that show kind of all of us working on it. And sometimes there's like video also,
So the process is actually a part of like what you're presenting.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's not all about like, a finished product. This is the product. This is like, you're
it's like the Prescott College, the journey.
Yeah.
Right? But at the same time, if you want to affect change in a big way, I think then sharing the product, a creative product from the journey is important,
Yeah.
So, and that's why we were so pleased to actually be able to put this book together. It became so much more than what we thought it would be. And it's also why, I would like to, I've been trying to record the songs, but that's not really my area, right? So, because, this is a tangible thing, the book, but when people hear the songs, then they also want.
Well, let's record a song now.
Okay. That'd be great.
Yeah, so like, do you want to, you were saying you want to like break down the process more?
No, it's whatever you feel kind of drawn to. I can tell you a little bit about one of the songs and play it, or just.
Yeah, why don't you do that?
Yeah, there's a really kind of, I almost said simple. There's no simple song. There's no simple story. But there is an early song that we wrote that I perform pretty regularly. It's only in English, because it was kind of early in the process. I think before we realized, like, we can actually sing in these other languages, and we can make sure that we're honoring the language by, inviting people to kind of make sure we're pronouncing it correctly, or at least attempting to. But so this song is in English, but it's one that I really, I love them all. But I could talk to you a little bit about writing it, and then it's short enough that.
Okay.
So this is the "I Am a Word" song.
Okay.
And I think it should be pretty early on in the book.
I think I might I'll look at if there's.
But if there's another one that you want,
Okay.
Like I said, we obviously couldn't cut any out.
Called? So. I Am a Word. Okay,
yeah.
So 31. I think that you have a good idea. I just wanted to actually look at the picture.
The message from it, I think, is quite profound for many reasons.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I'm reading it now. You know, I often like to hear the song as a whole.
Yeah.
Without looking at the words first.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Just let it kind of that embodied.
Feel that song.
Yeah.
Like I feel like this.
Yeah.
The song is really. You can't separate that. I
just think if there's ever a song that can communicate that a person who's a refugee is a human being and not dangerous, I think this is it.
Okay. Then that's actually.
Should I play
really
it and then I could tell, or do you want me to tell you a little more about it first?
However you want to do it. The process.
Yeah.
You know, if you tell me a little bit about it and the process that we see.
Yeah. Let's do that.
Insight into how it came to be.
Yeah, and I think because it really does. It reminds me of something that I noticed from this process was that, here you're working with people who have experienced a lot of trauma and a lot of frustration and waiting for the asylum process to kind of move through. And their stories were not expressions of anger and ire and frustration, and they were instead these expressions of hope, and that we should open borders, and that all of our hearts are beating, our blood is the same color, and we should never give up. And I mean, so this song was an early one like that, where this refugee from Syria was communicating in Arabic, and then here we are with the translation. The writer of the "I Am the Change" song from Gaza was translating the nuances into English, and we were writing it down, and essentially, from my understanding, from the several degrees of language translation, was that this person was saying, if I could be a word in the world and I could live in every single home, I would want to be a word of hope and love, and of honor, and that this could be a way that he could change the world for the better. So
now, do these people like you? All these versions of the songs, you're singing them, right?
So these were the recordings I've been working on. I'm singing because I don't have the ability to go back to Brussels or kind of find these people to record the songs with them. But I have recordings from the center of all of us singing together. I have videos.
And is that on the website?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So for every single song you click on, I've tried to share, kind of just audio, so you can actually hear us singing and discussing and the sort of unfolding of the process. And then there's video. And I also started bringing a bag of handheld rhythm instruments, because I was finding that people were looking at me, because I have an instrument, as like the musician, which I thought was funny, because I have my own inner critic about, just being able to write music and be a real musician, and whatever that means. But as soon as you give a person an instrument, there's a shift, right? So it's really important, I think, for the community aspect and for shifting people's perspectives of what they're able to create, to have everyone who wanted to play an instrument. And some people would just play an instrument and they wouldn't sing. Some people would sing. So, yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So I also just think, the message of this song, talking about, this idea of universal messages in the chorus that people can relate to. I mean, I think there's elements of this song that can speak to you regardless of what kinds of thousands of layers of experience have shaped you into the human being you are. And hopefully those haven't included becoming a refugee and having to go to another place. But I still think that, I listen to the song and I hear elements of my own life in it.
Oh, yeah. I remember one of my guiding principles of songwriting is the idea that the more personal it is, the more universal it is.
Yeah. And I think I think could be a reason to start with a story, because it's the personal and it's the unique to this person, but then there are ways to find messages that are universal. And then the melody, the rhythm, all of that comes a little bit later. Because, the song is a participant, so it's going to come out. It'll come out.
Right, the song knows how it wants to be.
Yeah. So there's trust. For me, there's been a lot of trust in that, and trying not to be too nervous about, will I be able to help guide this process into a song that people want to sing, and,
Right. I've come to trust music so much. Like when I do a workshop or something or a class, and I'm nervous, and I just remind myself the music really knows what it wants to do.
Yeah.
And I just have to be there. My job is to be present.
I mean, I guess I haven't had a lot of confidence also because, when I was working on this method, with my research partner, he was kind of in the role of the expert. And it took me a long time to recognize that my contributions actually helped to give birth to this method itself. And then it took me years of working with people writing music to realize that I do actually have the capacity to guide the process. Because we're all on a journey, right?
Well, you know what? I think it would be good to just mention this, that the first time I met you was when you were writing songs for a basic, dying person.
Oh, yes, for Jean.
You're helping that process.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was really for everybody.
That was very scary for me. That was that was one of the first songs that I worked on. After my research partner and I, we just kind of had diverging paths, and so that was an early song that I worked on my own with Marieke and with Jean. And so I had a very strong inner critic saying, how can you write a song about this person's life? How can you honor him? This is an enormous undertaking. But like you're saying, I think I just, at a certain point, you have to say thank you for keeping me humble and then just follow the song and what comes out.
Yeah. And it was really from my point of view, it was just a gift to everybody. And I still, because I see Marieke around, and I kind of feel like it really helped I'm closer. I don't think I even knew Marieke before that, and because of that experience, I know her.
Isn't that a really interesting?
We've talked about Jean. I remember, after he passed.
Yeah.
And it's just I think that songwriting could be a part of every dying experience. It could be part of the whole, hospice care.
But there's so much, right? I had another woman who asked me if I could write a song with her mother who was a Holocaust survivor, right? So and another woman who asked if I could write a song about her experience, meeting her husband. He, I think he had just passed away and she wanted something to remember. So there's I said before, I think every single person should experience this. It just so happened that when I was in Brussels, I thought, who really feels like their voice is not being heard?
Right, you're going right to the
most extreme. Yeah.
Right.
And can I, do I have the courage and trust that I can hold space for the song that wants to come out from these stories? And so for me, it was just a real kind of journey and trusting myself to even do that work. And that experience with Marieke and Jean was one of those really early kind of not solo journeys, because in the end we did it together.
Right. But you were the point person.
Yeah, it's a scary thing.
Yeah. So, and the thing is now, after that experience, you have this experience in Brussels. You have a lot of confidence.
I built a lot, but then it was saying, when I first came in, chatting with you and saying, oh my gosh, with the pandemic, it's really been 2 years now since I've really been able to work with people in person. And so then suddenly that inner critic comes back and says, well, what, can you still do this? You're not doing anything. And anyway, this is like getting into like a whole other, but just to say that we're all people. And so even the person who looks like they're the musician and the songwriter and they know what they're doing, we're just trying to follow that, trying to trust and trying to do our best.
Yeah, that's all we're doing. Just being here now.
And so coming back to I Am a Word, so this was a song that really wanted to be born. And it was written quickly. And I would love to go back and work with a native Arabic speaker to have Arabic. I think it's like one of those, where you have a book that's just so meaningful that they translate it into, 50 different languages. I feel like the message from this song, it's not because I think it's the best song in the world. These aren't, I don't know that these are songs that would ever, hit it on the pop charts. They don't follow the pop music equation. But I do think it's a message and a melody that can speak to many.
Okay.
So. I am a word of hope and love. I bring honor to the world. I will push the darkness away. Can I come to your house and stay? I am a word. I am the root of all resistance. I bring light for us to grow. I will push the sorrow away. Can I come to your heart and stay? I am a word. I am the life you've left behind, the path that you now follow, the melody of your song, the place you can belong. I am a word of hope and love. I bring honor to the world. I will push the darkness away. Can I come to your house and stay? I am a word.
Wow. I love Can I Come to Your House and Stay? There's some, that is just like, it expresses the vulnerability and the, like, asking the question, can I be this gift? Can I, is it okay if I gift you with my presence,
I promise I'm not dangerous.
Yeah.
I should say there's a lot of Sarah and me in these songs, and that was a line I think that Sarah added. So these are collaborative creations. So everybody contributes who wants to.
Right, and it's so when you think of like the way to contribute is sometimes so like hard to pin down, and like so everyone's contributions is just like it's a gestalt, it's like a group thing, like it's just happening together.
Yeah.
And you can't, that's what's like crazy. Like when you said like, it's not like a pop song, it's like I didn't even like why compare to a
why
pop
compare,
song.
right? So like we're talking about like capitalism and this definitions of success, right? And clicks, likes, and TikTok viral videos, and this is not that.
Right, this is such a
this is
different
quite
animal.
Raw, yeah.
And the like the pop world has to, like, for instance, like I've done these collaborations, and then I want to put them on, like make them available to put them on Spotify. And then I have to fill out these forms. I have to like, this is the person who did the words. This is the person who did the melody. You know, like we wrote the song, like Build the Bridges. I credit Donald Trump. Because if it weren't for him,
right,
the song wouldn't have happened.
Sure,
and
that's so funny. Tragic, but
yeah. But I mean, it's like he provided this, like, and my friend who like made me go to this thing that he was doing. Like, I didn't want to go, and if I hadn't gone, it might have happened in some form.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And then we started singing, people were shouting.
Yeah.
And they all contributed too. They were shouting, build bridges, take down walls, but we started singing rather than shout. Like we thought, like if we sing it.
Yeah. But I think credit is important, right? These are. I mean, I write songs from people's stories because I want those people to feel like their story is being told from their own voice, right? So, and a real part of the process in the Migration Songs project in Brussels was that, you know, we would try to include at least some words from every single person's contribution. And so if you have lots of different languages and different experiences being communicated, trying to shape that into one song. I mean, the song, you know, Open the Borders, that has lots of different languages. And there was like, how am I going to make this into one song? How am I going to guide that process? And then it's hard too, because you have one person who started the song who feels like really invested, and then suddenly other people come and it's like, you know, this is my song, and how do we create that? This is everybody's song, you know.
Well, the thing is, like, I think like that we have to figure this, those are like the fine details. Yeah. But that, like, as long as we know that really nobody really owns the song.
Exactly.
Like, ultimately, no song. Right. I mean, like I take songs like God Bless America. I changed it to God Bless the Entire World.
Yeah.
And I have a friend who refused to play it because he thought like I was dishonoring.
Well, just like the song itself is a creative participant in it, it's the writing, like the creation. But the finished song takes on a life of its own. It's like we're a parent and we've given birth to this song, and then we send it off into the world, and it's a folk song. Right. So it's going to take on whatever it, you know, however people hear it and sing it. It may be different. You know?
Wow, I like it because the song wants to be changed because it's like it's a person.
Yeah, it wants to follow its own path, like the child, right?
Like, yeah, when I'm born, like if I don't want to stay the same person, right. I want to grow and have other people contribute to my.
But like the parent can have trouble letting go of control and allowing the child to experience life as they will, where there isn't a lot of control. Just like for me as the guiding musician, I try really hard to hear what other people, especially the people who are contributing stories, want the song to become.
Yeah.
Right? I can say, I really think this would sound good, and if they just really don't want it.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
I mean, I just noticed the computer went black, so.
Oh.
Okay.
Thanks for pointing that out.
Sounds like it's still just.
It's still going.
Yeah. But I mean, so there is this trust and letting go. You know, that happens. And what is a finished song? I mean, when Malcolm and I were doing our work, we were like, when is the song finished, if
it's
ever?
Never finished.
It's just you send something out and then,
I'm fine. I still change. I rewrite songs that I wrote when I was a teenager, and I still do them.
Nice.
And
It's like coming back to a book and finding different meaning.
Yeah.
As you like go through life and have different experiences and, yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Okay, so you did that song. That is so beautiful.
Thank you.
Was there anything else that you talked about the process of that song?
Yeah, a little bit. And I mean, that was an early one. I think, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's, it's like, and you had asked kind of about the story to song method. And I mean, we did actually, Malcolm and I wrote an article that was all about like the stages of the method. But then it's like anything, you have those stages, but then each person you work with is unique. So the process is different each time, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting. I really want to actually, if I can find that. Can you give me a link to
Yeah,
that?
of course. And I mean, yeah.
Because I like my initial feeling, like when you were describing that, there was a little clamping up in me because I feel like that is like just so like not how I write songs,
Right.
and then how it's not how I write songs with like I anyway. We don't have
But
to get
also,
into
like, so when I was, when I was working, doing this research, I was at a place, like I said, where I didn't have a lot of confidence in my capacity. And we're doing this iterative process, and I was contributing and sharing my voice, and we were shaping and, writing about it. And then, in the work that we've done separately, our work's been really different because our approaches and our perspectives are really different. I think it seems like, Malcolm has gone on to want to really basically use this method to train other people and to make it really accessible for other people to write music in this way. I've wanted to be on the ground doing it, and I feel like it's really the song that's dictating to a great degree. So I wouldn't say that I follow these exact steps all of the time because it's just not a linear process.
Yeah, I really, but what I love about it is that it presents itself as because a lot of people really need steps. Like the idea of just writing
agree.
a song, like just
terrifying.
making up something, it's like impossible.
Yeah, especially if you're not a musician, right?
And and a lot of people painting. They won't paint something unless there's numbers to follow. Like you put this color here.
Yeah.
So like the more there's just like the more opportunities we give people to do this thing that like I feel like really I'm always scared of this word should, but we really all would benefit.
Yeah.
From greatly to be able to write songs.
I agree. And I think that making creative expression accessible is just first and foremost just so important because, like I said, so many of us have had it drummed into us, even those of us who are creative. And I've been told that I'm very creative, but somewhere over the course of my childhood into my young adulthood, I've had this idea that I wasn't, or I didn't have that capacity. So the more that you can help people realize and experience this process and that they do have this innate capacity and make it possible, the better,
Right. And it's so interesting, our stories, and then how we find ways, like the stories of inadequacy that we have as children that were given to us.
Yeah.
And then we find ways, like I was told that I had a low IQ, and that actually I had a teacher that told my mother I should just do something with my hands. And so, I became a piano player.
Well, there you go. They were,
and then I discovered my own brilliance, and I feel like everybody's got such unique genius, and we're told these stories about our inadequacies, our limitations, and then we find ways. Yeah. But some people don't. So we want to help. So we want to
nurture that, right? I mean, I feel lucky that that I crossed paths with all the different people that I have on my path, and especially, in this research process working on this songwriting method, because it did really change the course of my life and the way I think about who I am in the world. And, we should all be so lucky, right? And I mean, when you grow up in a system that looks at intelligence and values a certain kind of intelligence over others, it's
right, and it puts it on a linear scale.
Yeah.
Like the idea of IQ, being on some kind of So, But I think that we could collaborate on some things.
I would love that.
We could do a workshop songwriting.
Yeah.
Because we have these different ways. Yeah. And there's lots of things that we could do.
Yeah,
definitely. And I could talk to you for a long time.
Yeah, I know that you've got
what?
Certain. I don't know what time it is. So.
No, we still have time here. But I will have to edit. Well, I'll probably have to edit because I just don't want it to be too meandering.
Sure. Yeah.
But I do think
Yeah.
that this is all very important. You know,
Thanks.
what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And like how, like, and I want to, you know, bring it into, and I like the fact that we went a little bit astray because it feels connected to me, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know how this is actually going to be.
Well, the podcast will have a voice in the process too, right?
Right.
Like anything.
And,
yeah.
I mean, and like
Yeah.
I actually don't like. So some of these podcasts are like 15 minutes, and one of them, the longest one, was an hour, but this one is so far we've talked more than an hour. And I'm going to put in the description and everything, but you know, actually, people don't always read the description. So how about if you say.
Oh, sure.
Just tell people like websites or whatever.
Oh, yeah. Well, so everywhere in the social media world, you can find me as @guidingsong. It's pretty simple, and the website is guidingsong.com. So I use the story to song method, but I consider myself a guiding songwriter. So
guidingsong.com.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you want to go directly to this project, you can just do a /migration songs.
Oh, so it's all on that same website.
Mm-hmm. It's all in the same place, yeah.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, I mean, and from there you can get anywhere else.
Right.
Well,
Okay.
It's just a portal.
Excellent.
Thanks.
All right. Well,
Thank you so much.
That was really fun.
Yeah.
Everybody music. It's an ancient genre and the latest craze. Everybody music. It's a human revolution, not a passing phase. 'Cause everybody is a musical body designed from the ground up to connect. And everyone can be a music gardener. All you got to do is sow seeds of music wherever you go.
Don't forget to word them, though.
Everybody music. It's us.